Welcome to the Academic Writing Amplified podcast. On this podcast, we believe that the culture of academia needs to change radically. Women and non-binary people are revolutionizing academia within institutions that were not built for us. If you're ready to reject the culture of overwork, kick guilt and overwhelm to the curb, and amplify your voice to make a real impact on your field without breaking down or burning out, you're in the right place. With our team of experienced writing coaches as co-hosts, we'll share insights and talk to inspiring guests to bring you the practical strategies, systems, and mindset shifts you need to find time to write, publish work you love, and design your career on your terms. And it all starts with writing. Let's go. Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Academic Writing Amplified podcast. Before we jump into today's episode, which is all about my mission, in hopes that you hearing me talk through my mission versus purpose versus goal will help you to further refine and define your mission. So before we get to that wonderful, juicy episode, I wanted to ask a favor. So in order for me to help meet the mission that you're gonna hear me talk about in this episode, there's two things that you can help me do. One is I wanted you to know, if you didn't know, that we have a newsletter called In the Pipeline. And this newsletter is a weekly newsletter that you can sign up for at scholarsvoice.org. On any of the pages, if you just scroll to the bottom, you'll see a little form that asks you to put your name and email so that you can start receiving weekly advice, updates on academic publishing, book recommendations, and information to help you get your writing done and get your publication pipeline flowing. It's called In the Pipeline. I think will really help you and you will enjoy it. So if you haven't signed up for In the Pipeline, please go to scholarsvoice.org and do that. And if you have, if you would recommend that to one of your friends or academic colleagues, it would be so helpful to me. And I think helpful to them as well, because the purpose of In the Pipeline is absolutely to be helpful. So totally free weekly email series that will help your writing and publishing. The second thing you can do to that same friend maybe is recommend this podcast. The way that I love to express myself the most and communicate for 100% free my best advice and thoughts and leadership in the area of academic writing and publishing is here on the Academic Writing Amplified podcast. So if you enjoy it, something really helpful that you can do is just recommend it to a friend. Talk about it on social media if you want, but mostly just whoever are kind of like your academic besties, just make sure they know about the podcast. That would be so helpful to me. So thank you in advance. All right. You know, in the spirit of like the new year, and also in the spirit of having taken quite a substantial amount of time off over the holiday break, I've been thinking about my mission. So this is separate from what I teach inside of my programs about academic mission statement. Okay, so this is actually about the mission that I have for Scholars Voice. Okay, so for the company that runs our programs, that produces this podcast and produces the In the Pipeline newsletter and brings all of these things to the world. So for me, I think of a mission for a company as rather aspirational, right? Like what is like the big idea thing that you're trying to do? Knowing that, again, this is a mission statement for a company, not your academic mission statement, please be clear. Knowing that you probably won't actually achieve it, or it would be hard to achieve. So that's a way that I had been thinking about the mission for the company before I was inspired by someone else's podcast to get a little bit more specific. So the mission that I've always talked about, and I don't think I've talked about it that much on this podcast, but the mission for Scholar's Voice has been to change the culture of academia. And obviously, that is a big mission and it is rather vague, right? So you would have to listen on, you'd have to read my book, you'd have to listen to these podcasts to know what I mean by cultural change in academia. So in terms of a mission statement, it is one, but it isn't that refined. And over the course of the holiday break, I started really thinking about making the mission a little bit more specific, a little bit more measurable, and a little bit more helpful in helping me to make decisions about the business, right? So to relate to the academic mission statement idea, the purpose of the academic mission statement is to help you make decisions about your career, to curate your pipeline, to curate your week, right? The activities you do and things like that. So the academic mission statement has that similar, like, oh, it's a decision-making tool, right? So the mission for the business should also be a decision-making tool. And having it be to change the culture of academia maybe is not specific enough to be helpful. So I was listening to somebody else's podcast, a business coach that I follow, and she was talking about her mission, and it inspired me to come up with this one, which I am putting out on the podcast as a test, really. Like, I'm saying it, I'm going to explain it, and then see how you all react. See if this mission statement or this mission for Scholar's Voice gets any traction, and if it feels inspiring to you. It is inspiring to me, and it also really is helpful for decision making. I'm going to get really down into it in this episode. I have a lot of notes in front of me. So let's go. So here's the revised mission statement that I'm trying on for size for Scholar's Voice. To change the culture of academia by radically altering the experience of 1,000 women and non-binary professors by 2023. Now, I'm going to explain each part of it because I do think it's still not that specific. So I think, though, that if I talk through it, you all will understand it. It also helps me refine potentially the language of it. And also kind of shows you my process here. A parallel process for you will be that refinement of your academic mission statement. And maybe you even are somebody who has kind of like, maybe you lead an organization, or maybe you're starting your own business, or you have a lab, that kind of thing. And you're looking to write a mission statement for your lab, or for your research center, or for your department, or for any kind of project that you're on. And hearing me talk about this, I'm hoping will be helpful to you. Plus, most of the time, you all like these behind the scenes kind of what's my thought process kind of episode. So to change the culture of academia by radically altering the experience of 1,000 women and non-binary professors by 2030. So let's break it down. First, radically alter the academic experience. So what do I mean by that, right? Radically altering the academic experience. Okay, so for me, it means rejecting the culture of overwork. Okay, rejecting the culture of overwork and containing your job between the hours of roughly 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. What I want to express here is there is kind of this like accepted culture in academia that because it's knowledge work, you could be doing it basically 24/7. And maybe working 24/7 was, or some kind of near equivalent, was how you got through grad school. So it was like a way of working that had a real, tangible, positive payoff for you, which was that you got your doctoral degree, right? But you can't even, and maybe you didn't do that, right? Also, I want to acknowledge, many people do their doctoral degrees while they have children. And so working all the time is impossible, or they have a part-time or full-time job. Working on their academic work all the time is impossible. So I want to just acknowledge that. But kind of the underlying idea here is like, there's this accepted, culturally accepted, socially accepted idea in academia that we are not a 9-to-5 job, right? Like we're not bound by that. And what happens is this almost like this glorification of overwork, right? Like when you ask somebody in the hall, how are you doing? Often there's like this little exchange about how much everybody is overly busy and overworking. What I mean by overwork is working more than 40 hours a week. Like, because you're a human and you need to rest and you need to recuperate and you need to have time with your friends and family and time for yourself. So women, I think, especially struggle with this idea of overwork because there's a narrative around, like, if you're passionate about something, then it doesn't feel like work, which is like a little bit of BS to me because, like, obviously I talk a lot in my programs and on this podcast about that passion, about that drive, about that ambition. Ambition is very different from passion, but like that inner thing that, like, you've got ideas that you want to get out there and that can be exciting. But that doesn't mean that like the excitement of those ideas can feed you, right? Like literally or metaphorically. You can be passionate and also take vacations, right? You can be passionate and also work 40 hours a week, and it doesn't make you less passionate. And it shouldn't inhibit how people see you as ambitious or productive, quote unquote, or not, right? So that's just the first bullet, everyone, under radically alter the academic experience. Okay. Reject the culture of overwork, contain your job between 9 and 5, Monday through Friday. Or some equivalent that makes sense for you. Obviously, choose your 40 hours, but not this like overflowing all the time. I work all day, then I bring my grading home, and then I write on the weekends and all of that BS. No. All right. Radically altering the experience, the academic experience. What else does it mean? It means publishing to a level in line with your expertise. So this is a phrase I started using in the past year. Publishing to the level in line with your expertise. And you can tell me, like, write me an email, Kathy@scholarsvoice.org, and let me know, like, if this resonates or not. But I started realizing that a lot of now listen, I'll also say this. I talk about my clients on this podcast all the time because that's the only way that I hear from you all is when you become clients, unless you take the initiative to email me, which is also really great. But basically, if you're like, why does she always talk about my clients? Is she like flexing about the fact that she has programs? It's like, no, this is actually where I get my information from, is my clients, because they're the people who I know the best of all of you, right? Because I have them basically in my programs. And so I interact with them weekly. All right. So publishing to the level in line with your expertise. I've been realizing that many of the clients who have come into our Navigate program have this like misalignment between what they either feel they are or know they could be in terms of their expertise and what their publication record shows. So that there's this misalignment. And that you are actually a high level expert in your area, but because you have this backlog of papers, because you've been doing so many other things and trying to manage the tenure track job and everything, you don't have the CV that reflects that expertise that you feel. And even if you don't feel the expertise that you have, whether you own it or not. So what I mean by radically altering the academic experience is also that we start to have professors, women and non-binary professors, who are publishing to the level in line with their expertise, instead of having many, some, any women non-binary professors with this like misalignment between their level of expertise and their publication record. All right, another thing, radically altering the academic experience. What does it mean? It means moving writing from the periphery to the center of your career. So this is an idea that I've been talking about on the podcast and I write about in my book. What does this mean? So when your writing is at, here's symptoms, here's how you know. I think I actually have a whole podcast on this. How do you know if your writing is at the periphery? If writing always falls to the bottom of your list, if writing happens in the edges of your time, and by the edges of your time, I mean on nights, weekends, during the holiday breaks, during the semester breaks, those are the edges. That's not central. What you are doing day in and day out, Monday through Friday, during everybody else's working hours and your working hours, that is what is central in your career. So if writing is not happening during that time, it is possible that writing is sitting on the periphery of your career. And some of you might have like some resistance to this idea. Sometimes the resistance sounds like, but I'm so busy and I can only have quiet time on the weekends. Or people interrupt me, or, on the weekdays because I'm in my office and then students find me or colleagues find me and I get interrupted. So I don't get that like stretch of time without interruption. So that's some of the resistance to saying like, oh, but I need to write on the weekends for that reason, or I need to write at night for that reason. Or I'll just wait until the semester break to write. That's like, okay, right? But also an indication that writing is not at the center, because writing is a central activity for you as a scholar. It is central to your career. So it needs to sit in the privileged moments of your day, in your very best moments, not at the edges, not after you check email, not like, when you get around to it or pushed into the break. And the reason is that it's not sustainable that way. That one, you will not publish to the level in line with your expertise if you do that for your whole career. And two, you will burn out because you're overworking. Back to point number one. Okay, so moving writing from the periphery to the center of your career. It's not an afterthought. It is the thought. It is the thought that drives. It is the activity that drives your career, not the tail end result of some other thing of what drives your career. Okay? So what else describes a radically altered academic experience? All right. Redefining leadership on your own terms. Ooh. So many people that I talk to in academia are like, leadership, no, because they make the connection of leadership to deanship, or leadership to department chair, or leadership to unpaid admin work, right? Or undercompensated admin work. But actually, for many of you, leadership looks different, but it's still leadership. You are still leading groups of people. You are still helping to shape what others around you do. And that's leadership. So I want you all to, or radically altering your academic experience would be having your own definition of leadership that feels good to you, feels right to you. Because just, I can't say every academic is a leader, because that sounds ridiculous. Like in terms of that kind of takes away or dilutes the meaning of the term leader maybe. But you are at least leading your students and your lab, and you might really be leading your colleagues in your field. People are looking to you. So having a definition of leadership and a philosophy of leadership is really important. But again, back to why many academic women and non-binary professors don't have that is because they think of leadership as admin. So redefining leadership on your own terms. And then another thing I have here in my notes for radically altering the academic experience, the last thing is to freaking enjoy your career. Enjoy it. Like, have fun doing it. Be inspired by it. Have like sparky thoughts about it. And that goes back to the 90% awesome idea that I talked about in podcast episode number 200, which was the first podcast of the year. You can go back in your feed and find it. Like, it should be 90% awesome, or at least like we should be on a path towards 90% awesome so that it is enjoyable, that your career is enjoyable. So if your career is only stressful, or let's say this, if your career is 90% stressful, 90% tedious, 90% exhausting, you are too precious for that. Like, that does not a great academic make, because you are going to just peter out and you're going to be so run down that we never get the amazing contributions of your brain. So enjoy your career. That would be a radically altered academic experience, enjoying your career. Okay, so again, mission statement: to change the culture of academia by radically altering the experience of 1,000 women and non-binary professors by 2023. What I mean by radically altering the experience is rejecting the culture of overwork and containing your job in 40 hours a week, publishing to a level in line with your expertise, moving writing from the periphery to the center of your career, redefining leadership on your own terms, and enjoying your career. Enjoying it. Okay? So that's what I mean. I might be able to come up with a better encapsulating phrase at some point, but I wanted you to understand it. So that's why I said it here. Okay, next part. The next part is altering the experience of 1,000 women and non-binary professors by 2030. I keep getting the year wrong. I'm disillusioned about what year it is and what year it's going to be. So I picked two numbers: 1,000 professors and 2030. So I want to talk about why. And actually what I want to say is 1,000 more professors by 2030. Because we've already, I hope, and maybe not as like radically, no, I think I've radically altered the experience. If the people really did my course and did the things and took the programs and did it, then they have had a radically altered experience. And I started this business in 2017. And since then, over 600 people have participated in all the various versions of our Navigate program and our other additional programs and retreats. So really what I mean by 1,000 professors is 1,000 additional professors, because I've already helped, and I have to remember this, between 500 and 600 professors with my work. Amazing. All right. I have to take that in a little bit. All right. So I've spent 6 years, right? 2017 until now, seven years, experimenting and expertise building in this venture, which is now called Scholar's Voice. It used to just be my name. Now it has its own name. And I think that it's really important to acknowledge that and to think about the ways in which you have been experimenting and expertise building throughout your career. So I had an entire career as an academic. I got all the way to full professor. I started a research center. I did a little stint in admin, did not like it. I was 13, 14 years going through on the tenure track, right? Plus my PhD and master's and all those things. So there was definitely experimenting and expertise building there. But then when I started my business, I started a new process of experimenting and expertise building. And I'm seeing 2023 was like a really pivotal year for me in my business. And so I want to mark, like here on this podcast and with this mission statement, I want to mark this point in time for me as a professional development professional. I think that previous to now, so the previous 7 years, has been a phase of experimenting and expertise building. And now I'm entering the next phase of my business. So it makes sense for me. And also, like, I like the idea of these specific numbers, right? To say, okay, well, I've had 7 years. And now we are looking at, okay, what will the next 7-ish years bring? And that is between now and 2030, right? And I put this number 1,000. I'm going to explain the number 1,000. I'm going to explain this kind of like ripple effect idea. But I want to talk a little bit more about like this idea of having had like a phase in my business that was experimenting and expertise building. And now I am entering a new phase. I'm going to explain that, but I also want you to think like about phases in your career. I think that I like to talk about seasonality, ebbs and flows. And when you think about a career, it's not a homogeneous experience for 30 years in any way. There are seasons to it. But I think that we often, like, we're ambitious, like we want to do everything all at once. We want to, like, I don't know, like get to some kind of idealized result faster. So I don't know, like we think it all needs to be the same. And I really think we need to embrace more seasonality as academics. Like it's funny because our careers, our like year is more, by default seasonal than many other careers, right? Like because we have this like semester or trimester, but like we think of semester system, we have this fall, spring, summer, very seasonal, right? Even in the way that we name the semesters is often seasonal. But we don't think of our careers seasonally. And I think we could, because that would take some pressure off of us trying to do everything all the time. Like that we need to be both publishing at our highest level and also collecting more data and also getting grants and also managing the grants we already have. There's like doing all of the things at the same time to the same high level, instead thinking seasonally. So I'm hoping that you'll see by me talking about a little bit of seasonality here in my professional development business, I hope you'll be able to kind of think about for you, if you had to like sit in retrospect and look at your past, however many years you've been in your career, how would you like name the seasons or name even maybe it's been one season? Because I also feel like obviously in the past 7 years, I could go through each year of my business and say something about seasonality, but I'm actually trying to kind of put a flag in the sand right now and say like before January 2024 and after January 2024. It's January 2024 when I'm recording this, even though you might be listening to this at the beginning of February. I'm not sure when this episode is going to drop. Okay, anyway, so what is the next phase of my business where I'm going to help 1,000 more women and non-binary professors by 2030? All right. The next phase is that now that I have experimented a lot, I've had a lot of programs, I've birthed and shelved more than 7 programs probably. And those of you who have been here since the beginning, or if you listen to the back catalog of the podcast, you'll hear me mention a bunch of previous programs that have been put on the shelf because they were helping me experiment and build expertise, but they are not what is going to keep going forward, what I'm going to keep going forward with. So this phase of the business is really all about, now that I know what I know, simplifying and making the path to change for my clients like really, really clear. So after running all of these programs that I've like run and shelved, and I've run Navigate like so many different ways, I realized, so after running like kind of additional programs, because I used to have a program that was like the pre-tenure program and the post-tenure program, but you could join Navigate or you could join one of those other two programs and you didn't have to do Navigate first. So after doing that for a long time, I realized that everybody needs Navigate. Like that I put my best or my most foundational work inside of Navigate, and that is the 101. That is the foundation. And I actually don't think it's a one-on-one. It's a one-on-one for me in my business, but a lot of you have done NCFDD, and I would consider like that the 101. And then mine is like the 201. Navigate is like the next level up, or the however you number things at your university, right? So that doesn't mean you have to take NCFDD before you come into Navigate, but just in case you're wondering. So I was like, no, I've known for a long time that everybody needs Navigate. I was afraid to kind of obligate everybody to take Navigate first. So in 2023, I created a container for Navigate that I knew many people would find appealing to do, okay? I basically sat down and I was like, let me redesign this program from scratch with all of the now, right, the experimenting that I've done and the expertise that I've built. And what I came up with is something that is very understandable to academics. It is a 12-week program. There is recorded content. You get to keep that recorded content for a year, but the program is 12 weeks long. 12 weeks, lesson releases on Monday, Zoom meeting on Friday. So former versions of the program were too long. So I realize this now. So we've done the program where it was like a year long and they had too many parts to them, like too many things to show up to. So we'd have the recorded curriculum, and then we had all these other things, lots of other meetings, online forums, co-writing meetings, like multiple co-writing meetings a day, 2 weekly half-an-hour mindset calls, peer review. We did like all these things, like crazy, like monthly, live workshop, like planning sessions, like all of this kind of stuff. It was like so much that it was like, I can tell you why I did it. I will in a second. But I think that the result, instead of the result being helpful, is that the result of having so many things in the program was like, this program is overwhelming and I am already overwhelmed. Like you all are already overwhelmed. You don't need to voluntarily be more overwhelmed. So it was just like too many things to show up to. And yeah, contributed potentially, like not for everybody, but it potentially contributed to more overwhelm. And it also, from the back end or from the business side, it was so complicated to run and it was so complicated to coach, and it needed a lot of people, and it needed a lot of tech, and it needed a lot of platforms, it needed a lot of systems. It was like very, very complex. Now, in retrospect, and that was like, by the way, the latest version of Navigate. Navigate became that maybe in 2020, like in November 2020, maybe that was the first time we did it that way. Then we did it that way for 2 years. And I think that a lot of that was kind of pandemic induced because people seemed like people needed to be online with each other because they couldn't be together in person. So we just kept creating these online spaces where people could be together. But truthfully, I don't know, it wasn't that helpful, or maybe it was helpful. I hope it was helpful for you if you did it, but it was in the end too complex. and not a model to move forward with post-pandemic. I also think that that model reflected a little bit of my fear, or a little bit of maybe my imposter syndrome, actually, about being an expert. And so if you don't, like if I'm acting from a place of not being 1,000% confident about the content of Navigate, then I'm putting extra bells and whistles to try to make it look valuable, quote unquote, or like more valuable, when it didn't need any of that stuff. It was the most valuable. The curriculum itself is highly valuable. And it is now absolutely refined and at its best and stable, will be held stable for the next until 2030. Okay. So, in 2023, did the 12-week Navigate container revision. Meeting for 1 hour a week for 12 weeks is a really, in my opinion, doable commitment and mirrors the commitment that you will make to your writing. So in Navigate, it's like 1 meeting a week for an hour, and then also recorded material. We ask people to try to find an hour, early in the week to do the recorded modules and the worksheets, then show up to the hour call. That's 2 hours a week, mirroring the commitment to your writing that is necessary to get your publication pipeline flowing and publish your backlog of papers. You're practicing holding that space in the 12 weeks so that you can continue to do that when that program is over. So you learn the foundation in 12 weeks of the foundation of how to write an article in 12 weeks, and then how to repeat that system for writing an article in 12 weeks. All of that looks like a writing and publication program. It's actually a career program. You're actually making big decisions and focusing your career. It's a career program disguised as a writing and publication program. So the result of the 12 weeks is that you'll submit an article. But the bigger result is that you will now know how to submit an article in 12 weeks. And that means that, that comes out to be about the 3 articles a year, right? And let's be realistic. Let's be realistic for a second. If you're like, 12 weeks is too long, I can't take 12 weeks. You're taking more than 12 weeks. So everybody can chill out and we can say that it takes 12 weeks to write an article off of already analyzed data. Okay. So in Navigate now, in this new version, the version we're going to use going forward to radically alter the experience of 1,000 women and non-binary professors by 2030. You're going to learn the foundation in 12 weeks, and then you can continue to deepen your mastery on your own, or you can repeat rounds of the program and stay with us for that once a week meeting for every cohort. We're going to run 3 cohorts a year: January, late January, May, mid-May, and late August. So January, May, August, spring, summer, fall. You pay once a larger fee, and then for each additional round, you pay a much reduced fee, like less than 1/3 of the price. That's it. There's no other programs. There's no memberships. There's no online groups. There's no Facebook. There's none of it. It is the recorded curriculum, and a weekly call on Zoom. So 2023 was the pilot year for this. I developed our admissions process. I developed our benchmark assessment, which you take coming into the program and then at the end of the 12 weeks. And now we're going to be able to report data publicly on that benchmark, how people, what improves for people in the program. And also that benchmark also helps each client track their own progress towards mastery of the program outcomes. So I built that in 2023. And we've had different kinds of surveys and things before. We tried to do program assessment in different ways before. But now I feel like Program content's nailed. Program format, container, I call it the container, right? The 12-week thing with the one call a week is nailed. Benchmark assessment is nailed. Admissions process is nailed. Not changing anything. I mean, we might change the admissions process as we go forward, because right now to enter the program, you apply and then you have a pre-enrollment call with me. And so obviously, if we're going to help 1,000 people by 2030, which is 6 years, like that's 149 people, 167, something in there, people per year, which means 50, 60 people per cohort. And I can't have 50 calls for every cohort because I don't have enough hours for that. So at some point, if we start to get close to hitting this goal, then maybe there won't be individual pre-enrollment calls anymore. It'll be a webinar or an information session or something else. I don't know. But for 2024, it's going to be a call with me. So I'm looking at my notes again, and I want to say this year, we won't have 167 people take the program. So I have to think, well, this year, because this is like I got to ramp up. So in 2024, I'm really hoping for 60 people, 20 new people in each cohort. And then we can kind of start to up the numbers in 2025 and 2026, if possible. The way that if you're like on board, you might not be on board till the next part. So let me say the next part, and then I'll tell you what you can do, what actions you can take if you would like to participate in helping me to achieve this mission. All right. So I want to dig in now to the number of people, right? 1,000 women and non-binary academics. Why 1,000? All right. So I was thinking about this idea of changing the culture of academia. And it's like, well, how do you change a culture? The way that I've always thought about changing a culture, and the way that I write about it in my book, is this idea of the ripple in the pond, right? Like you drop a pebble in the pond and there's this ripple effect. And the 1,000 people are the pebble, right? That's the pebble. So if I help one academic radically change her career in the ways that I outlined before, then I'm affecting that individual person and all the people who are looking at her, right? All the people who are looking at that academic and as a leader or as their advisor. So if I change that one person's experience, radically alter it the way that I talked about at the beginning of the podcast, right? Then the people around that person in the ripple effect theory are also getting altered. They are experiencing an advisor who is calm. They are watching somebody with writing at the center. They are watching somebody who enjoys their career, right? And that academic is also supposedly, right, like working in a way that is more enjoyable to those people around them. So it's like you're also attracting more people and becoming a leader by being attractive, right? But people don't want to be around miserable, stressed out people, you know? So, and also, hello, you're building your portfolio and your writing is in line with your expertise. Your publications that are out in the world are in line with your expertise. And so more people will seek you out because you're also like more of an expert. And I don't just mean students. I mean, you know, colleagues and everything. So I think that helping 1,000 women and non-binary professors will have the effect, the ripple effect of helping many, many, many more people. And it is the only way that I can think of having an impact and having cultural change. I also want to say that if I help 1,000 academics to radically alter their experience of academia, period, that is enough for me. If just the people who participate in the program change, great. And they never have a ripple effect on anybody else, that is also actually enough for me. And that was something I needed to figure out, because I kept coming back to this idea of I want to change the culture of academia. How do you change the culture of academia? And it's yes, I want that. And I think that this is the most impactful way for me to do it. And if the whole culture of academia doesn't change, at least these 1,000 people and the 600 people before them will have changed their experience of academia by participating in Navigate. So this is how I'm imagining an impact that is huge and that supports me and my family and my desired workload at the same time, right? So absolutely, there could be other ways to get this impact or to get an even bigger impact. But for me, this is the way that is aligned with my values and my purpose for my career. In 2030, I will be 55. So I think that having that as the end date, or the goal date, not the end date, but the goal date, makes sense, right? 55 years old is a good time to kind of say wow, I've achieved this really big thing by that age. That's the way I'm thinking about it right now. So let's see. Let me check my notes. So yeah, that is my mission, to change the culture of academia by radically altering the experience of 1,000 women and non-binary professors by 2030. Now, if you're I want to do that, I want to help. Thank you very much for having that thought, if you've had it. Then the best way is actually what I said at the top of this podcast, which is sharing the podcast with other colleagues. Of course, if you want to be one of the 1,000 women and non-binary professors who have a radically altered academic experience, then get on the wait list for Navigate. You can go to scholarsvoice.org/navigate. Get yourself ready for the next cohort or the cohort after that. I'm going to be announcing more information so that you can have kind of more information and ask more questions about the program ahead, way ahead of our actual enrollment period, so that you can so that you can plan, right? So if you want to be one of the 1,000 people, awesome. If you're I already did Navigate, or I already did one of the other programs, thank you so much for the way that you contributed to the development of this new mission by helping me experiment and develop my expertise. So thank you. And if you're I love this podcast, but I'm never going to do that program, also totally cool, please just share the podcast. That is the best thing. Also up there with best things is to share, to get on, to subscribe to the In the Pipeline newsletter, which you can do at scholarsvoice.org. That's Scholars Voice all together. Obviously, there's no apostrophe in it, right? So scholarsvoice.org. And you can scroll to the bottom of any of the pages, and then there's an opt-in form where you can put your name and your email and subscribe to our In the Pipeline newsletter for weekly writing and publishing advice, book recommendations, and all of that kind of juicy stuff. So that's the ways that you can help. I would love that. So let me say this, we've had over 500,000 podcast downloads which is like incredible to me. Like I cannot with that number. 500,000? Come on. That means that episodes of the podcast have been downloaded 500,000 times. That's ridiculous. Every episode of the podcast gets around, by the time it ramps up, right? Because it's not necessarily in the first week, but in like the first month, each episode of the podcast gets around between 2,000 and 3,000 downloads. That means that there are between 2,000 and 3,000 of you, I think, roughly subscribed to the podcast, where you get it, it downloads to your device, and hopefully you listen, right? So I would really love to increase that number. I mean, in fact, the only way that we can get to 1,000 people in the programs is by increasing the number of people listening to the podcast, because most often people find us through the podcast or they find us some other way, but the podcast is what they mainly listen to in order to get to know the work of Scholar's Voice, right? And my work. So please share it. In the end of the day, that's the bottom line, is please share it. Would love to see if, we could get those numbers even higher, because again, ripple effect. And I also know, I know that I'm helping more than 1,000 people. My book, which is only like $17 or something, it's called Making Time to Write. It's in all the places. People are helped by the book, I know, for a very small price. People are helped by the podcast for free. People are helped by In the Pipeline for free. I think that to make like sticky change, I know, or I should say, I'm most confident in helping create a radically altered experience of academia. I feel most confident saying that I'm doing that, or doing that inside of Navigate. So having 1,000 people take Navigate between now and 2030, that's that part of the mission. Even though I do know that people find the podcast helpful and all of that. And I know that because people tell me, thank you. Thank you. Leave a review, actually, while we're talking about things that you can do. But yeah, that's my mission. I hope that you have gotten something juicy out of this rather longish podcast episode, and that it helps you think about your mission in a different way, that it helps you think about seasons or phases of your career, and that in some way this has been inspiring to you. And most of all, I would be so honored if you were inspired to act on helping to create this mission in the world. And the best way to do that is get on the wait list for Navigate and become one of those 1,000 people, or share the podcast and share the In the Pipeline newsletter that you can find at scholarsvoice.org. Have such a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Thank you so much for spending your valuable time supporting yourself and your writing by listening to this episode. If you like what you heard today, the best way to say thank you is to hop on over to Apple iTunes and write an honest review. The more reviews, the more amazing academic women and non-binary people will find this podcast. So go write one now.